Every gamer has a hidden gem. Every gamer has those games that they consider to be titles among others that were very underrated titles. This could be because they were overshadowed by more popular games being released at the time, they didn't get the critical reception that they deserved, or just simply at the time it was released at the wrong time frame and gained popularity at a much later date. Whatever the reason, these titles among gamers are called hidden gems. And these are my top 5 hidden gems. Power Up Mushroom and Namdi, if you guys are watching this, I am curious to hear what your top 5 hidden gems are of all time. Kicking off this list is Wild Arms for the PlayStation. Wild Arms for the PlayStation is such an amazing title. Not only was it set up as an RPG to, in a way, combat the Final Fantasy VII game, it took a lot of elements from Japanese RPGs that had been very traditional, the turn-based combat, things like that, and added into a Wild West setting. And this was something that had never really been done during a Japanese RPG. This is something that Japanese RPGs still don't do a whole lot of. And it's strictly something Wild Arms series has just kind of become to be known for, is its Wild West steampunk environment. But on top of that, Wild Arms took it a step further by adding a lot more puzzle solving into their dungeons. Their setup was very based on solving puzzles rather than moving through the dungeon and fighting enemies. Though fighting enemies was still very prevalent in the game, you had to solve the dungeon's puzzles as well. And this was something, as a fan of RPGs, that I really enjoyed. This is something from RPGs I still enjoy today. Games I still enjoy is setting up that puzzle aspect and you trying to essentially try to find your way to go through there. Not only that, but Wild Arms has a really great soundtrack as well as a really good story. I also enjoyed Wild Arms characters, and it kind of sits today as one of the underappreciated gems on the PlayStation during that time. Now, next game we're going to talk about, we're going to go ahead and shift over to the PlayStation 3. PlayStation 3 launched back in 2006, and during that initial launch, the PS3 did not start gaining momentum until 2010. There were a couple of titles there that were very, very overlooked that I do want to talk about. The first one up was one of the early release titles for the PlayStation 3, this game being Folklore. Now, for those of you who do not know anything about Folklore, Folklore takes place in a fictional town over there in Ireland. And it uses a lot of the Irish lore, the fairy world, brings a lot of the Irish mythology, Irish creatures into this world, as there is a murder that kind of goes on in this village, and the main characters, Ellen and Keats, are basically sent into the fairy world to investigate what's going on. Now, Folklore definitely does have that very traditional action-based RPG element that we've come accustomed to. The game, in a way, is actually considered to be an action RPG. Though the gameplay mechanics are very simplified, the attack animations are very simplified, it's very much a hack-and-slash style game. The game is fun as you're able to switch through different monsters that you actually capture and use their abilities in combat to traverse through the fairy world to go through and explore the game story as a whole. And I really enjoyed the whole concept of it. The gameplay mechanics were never the greatest, but one of the most unique gameplay mechanics from Folklore was the use of the 6-axis control, where you would actually use it to combat your enemies, moving up and down like this, and you would eventually suck the enemy into you so you could use their abilities. It very much has this gotta catch them all feel to it, and I thoroughly enjoyed that as an experience. That was a very well thought out game, and one of the plot twist at the end I did not see coming. That game has an amazing story plot twist towards the end there. Next up on this list is another PlayStation 3 title that I feel just got overlooked completely, and this was Valkyria Chronicles. Valkyria Chronicles is for those of you who do not know, is mixes the RTS strategy elements into a full-on RPG, and it worked very well. It had a very tactical battle system, to say the least. Sometimes this battle system could be very difficult. Your characters would have a certain amount of distance that they could move, or run to, and once you were there, you could take cover behind your sandbags to take down the enemies, and depending on where you placed your enemies would give you a tactical advantage. You definitely want to take into precaution where your enemies were going to go and plan ahead. This was something very heavily introduced in Valkyria Chronicles battle system. Planning ahead was essential if you were going to get anywhere in that game. The game can be very difficult at times, but its battle system is probably one of the most rewarding battle systems I have ever stumbled across. Now, its story I also thought was very good as well. It's not anything grand and not anything definitely epic, I would say, but its story definitely hits that emotional, war-torn world and kind of what happens during that, as it's set up into a fictional world that takes a lot of inspiration from World War II at the time. And its characters are some really well-written characters. Welkin is such a well-done main character. I feel like as a main character as a whole, Welkin stands out among a whole slew of other Japanese main characters that have just kind of got pushed under the radar. Even a lot of other characters from Valkyria Chronicles feels like that they stand out. The cast was just very well developed. The next game I want to talk about is a DS title that was received critically well by critics, but never garnished the success or got the sales that it deserved. And this is The World Ends With You. The World Ends With You is such a vastly underrated title that I wish many more gamers would get the chance to play. It was originally released on the Nintendo DS, but since then it has been put on many mobile devices, so gamers do have another way to go about and play this game. But this game utilized both the top and bottom screens of the Nintendo DS. While using the stylus to control the bottom screen, where you draw simple patterns on the touchscreen to get Niku to do his abilities, you'd use the D-pad to control the characters up at the top, and this would cause them to do moves as well. So the battles were set up into that very unique setting where you did control both screens at one time. I can imagine for some players this was very overwhelming, but once you got used to the general concept and how it worked, it became very easy to do, very fluent to do, and it was really a lot of fun. One of the other biggest things that The World Ends With You did that I think is worth talking about is it does have a good soundtrack, but it has some really great characters and a really great story. The story, perhaps, is where it stands out the most, though it does take Niku and throw him in this world where he is a amnesiac, doesn't really remember how he got there, and all this, and he learns that he's stuck inside this video game where the entry price was basically his life. If he wins, he gets to go back and live. But he later finds out that in order to get into this video game world, he had to die at one point. He can't remember how he died. He has to go back and kind of learn how he died. Of course, this is all revealed towards the end of the game, and we do get to learn why Niku ended up, how he ended up there and kind of what happened to him during his life. It all came together and told us one amazing narrative that I feel like would be perfect for Square Enix to give off to an animation studio and let them turn into an anime. The World Ends With You is also one of those Nintendo DS games that I would absolutely love to see a sequel to. The last game that I do want to touch upon, of course, is Star Fox Adventures. I loved Star Fox Adventures, and for lack of a better term, I thought it was one of the best GameCube games out there, especially during the time that it had come out. Now, I know a lot of people consider a horrible Star Fox game. It wasn't what they wanted in the Star Fox game, and I can get behind that. I will say I really did enjoy Star Fox 64 and Star Fox Adventures the most. I kind of see where people were disappointed with Star Fox Adventures, but it seems like it gets an awful lot of hate. When in actuality, Star Fox Adventures removed the Star Fox title, it was a very solid gameplay experience. It was very fun. And in a way, Fox's staff kind of replaced Link and his sword there for quite a while the GameCube was still going. So the story was subpar. The story was not anything great, but the environment and the scenery was really fun to look at. Nintendo paid a lot of attention to the detail in that world and bringing it to life and creating some very unique and memorable environments, especially some of the Force Point temples that you had to go through. as well as like Cloud Runner Fortress and it's just some other things that they incorporate in there that I thought were very, very well done. And the gameplay mechanics were fun. They worked, especially when you were grounded on there. I didn't care much for the R-Wings of flying to the different little sub-chunks of the planets and things like that. I thought that was a bit awkward. But overall, it was such a fun experience, such a fun game. And I feel like it just kind of got pushed under the radar because it wasn't the Star Fox sequel that everybody wanted to play. But if we go back and take a look at that as a game as a whole, I think the game is very, very good. Thoughts, opinions, leave those down below in the comment box. Let me know what your guys' most underrated titles are. I'm very curious to know. Be sure to hit subscribe there for me. New content will come your way. And follow me on Facebook and Twitter. Those links are going to be down below in the description box. You guys have been watching the Spoony Bard. And most importantly, stay happy, be happy, game happy. Spoony Bard is checking out.